Michael Kroger, what he did do was also run his agenda on and in the way that he saw fit, not the way tradition might have suggested. And in that, I think of the traditional media outlets that premiers, prime ministers have attended for years and decades. But he brushed that. He went to social media. He went around traditional media in many respects. He did show up every day during COVID at those news conferences. However, he didn't always answer the questions. He was brilliant at that sidestep, that political manoeuvre. As someone who's watched politics and Victorian politics as long as you have, and I know the criticisms have been clear in terms of the debt and the other problems, but how do you rate that as a political operator?
Oh, incredibly highly. Andrew's great skill was two things. First of all, never admit fault unless it's, minor on a Sunday morning. But basically, he gave the impression to everybody of great strength, of infallibility, of back me because I know what I'm doing. Extremely confident media performances, always dominant, never in doubt. Often wrong, but as they say, but never in doubt. And it was that strength that people said, well, okay, we'll back him. He doesn't seem to be apologising. He doesn't seem to be saying he's got anything wrong. I mean, even during Labor's worst scandals, he would just brush it off and carry on as if nothing had happened. Red shirts, the scandals with IBAC, his own appearances, etc. He's just dishing opponents. So the aura of invincibility was his greatest political skill. But that having passed now, it'll go to Jacinta Allan. She'll be the new Premier tomorrow from Daniel Andrews' own left faction. But the other thing which people haven't worked out about him is this. This is the great skill of Andrews, apart from his public appearances, at a policy level. That's at a political level. At a policy level, Kieran, it's this. To work out that the public were insensitised to debt. For decades, when Jeff Kennett left office, state debt was $3 billion. And the Bracks-Brumby government were very careful not to be seen to be like the Kane government. So Bracks and Brumby were very careful about state debt. And when Ted Bailey took over in 2010, state debt was 11. So it'd gone from 3 to 11. It's now 170 billion, a decade or more later. Andrews understood that the electorate weren't concerned about government debt. It wasn't their debt. They didn't feel they had to run it up. They weren't paying it off. And Andrews promised massive largesse. And people felt, well, he seems to know what he's doing. He's very strong about everything. He keeps racking up these huge debts, but we don't have to pay it off, and we're getting some infrastructure for it. So Andrews understood that debt was no longer a concern to people in the last decade. Now the wheel has turned, as it always will, economically. But he was the first leader to realise the old days of the Liberal Party saying cut, 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 the old days of austerity where we had to have balanced budgets and profitability and no government debt. That was the language of the 90s and the first decade of this century. But Andrews understood the electorate, and particularly young people, because they'd only ever seen economic prosperity, never lived through a recession, that government debt wouldn't hurt him electorally, and he was 100% right on that.
One of the other things, just to pick up on that, is that jumped out at me from his political antenna was that all politics is local, we know that, but those rail crossing removals that he did enabled him to campaign in every local community right across the state of Victoria. It might sound like not the most complex piece of infrastructure, but what it did do was take his politics into every community around the state. Andrew Clennell's with me as well, and Greg Sheridan. Andrew, the successor, who will it be?
Well, my information, that what I can glean at the moment, is Jacinta Allan is definitely the favourite, the Deputy Premier. I think Michael might have mentioned that. So Jacinta Allan in the box seat, a similar age to Dan Andrews. I think she's 50, Dan Andrews is 51. She's been in the parliament since she was about 26 or 25. She's the longest serving female minister in Victorian history. And similar to Dan Andrews, they've just been in politics since really their early 20s. You heard Anthony Albanese say there at his doorstop that he used to flat Daniel Andrews, who worked for Alan Griffin as a staffer in Canberra. These guys have been around politics their whole lives, but interesting. She's about the same age. She definitely is the favourite. And it'd be interesting. The most interesting thing in these situations: do they go into vote? Simon Love will be all over that. Whether there's jostling for positions, sometimes people put their hands up when in fact really they're just after, say, the Treasury role, but they put up a bit of a fight first. We'll see. I might just say I said that it was unheard of that Dan Andrews had gone just 10 months into a 4-year term. Certainly is in other states. It ain't in Victoria. I've had a Victorian Labor staffer point out to me, Steve Brack stood down in July 2007 after winning the third term in November 2006. So history repeating itself here in Victoria today, Kieran.